Now, type 2 diabetics, however, even 150 years ago, type 2 diabetics were treated with a low carbohydrate diet. Their diet was meat, eggs, butter, dairy. It was in medical books. Type 2 diabetes, people knew even a century ago that you could keep it under control, or you could even put it into remission if you avoid the carbohydrates. So now, if obviously type 2 diabetes isn't controlled, the implications, and even poorly controlled type 1 diabetes, even type 1 diabetics who are on insulin, but they're not able to control their blood sugars properly, the complications are disastrous for both, and they're very similar, very, very similar complications. So neuropathy, losing limbs, blindness. I mean, people younger than 20 years younger, the people in their 30s are losing their sight because of uncontrolled blood sugars. Of course, cognitive impairment, dementia, heart attack. Right, heart disease is prevalent among diabetics, kidney disease. So most people, I don't know the exact number, but it's a very big percentage, like something like 80% of people in dialysis wards are actually diabetics. So every organ within your body, if your blood sugars aren't controlled, whether you're type 1 or 2, if they're not well controlled, every organ will eventually fail.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, very good explanation. So I love when I get this question. The appointment I had just before this was a first-time consultation for a couple who's asking a lot of really good questions about some of this stuff. They're wanting to become healthier. They've been getting the standard advice for what to do to be really healthy. So go on the diet, make sure you're exercising a lot and burning lots of calories. They know that, vegetables and fruits are the best thing they could possibly eat. And I'm kind of explaining things and picking things apart and trying to explain a different paradigm for them. And they asked me this question, which I love. I love getting this question. They're like, okay, well, then are carbohydrates bad? And it's like, no, carbohydrates are not bad. They're not in of themselves bad. And I used the example of gardening, which I thought was super appropriate. Like, think of that garden. You're doing a lot of work to get a very small amount of food at a very seasonal time of the year. And unless you're finding some way to save that food is going to go away. So it's not the carbohydrates are problematic. It's that we don't have them all year, all the time in most places on the planet. And I've been stunned even walking around like moderate climates, places that are much warmer. Like, you probably would have noticed this in San Diego when you were there last year. Even warm places where things are growing all over the place, edible food is not just spontaneously growing everywhere. You kind of have to seek it out or plant it yourself and take care of it. And there's this whole process that comes along with it. And so it's just a different paradigm of, like, when we live in this world where carbohydrates are plentiful and everywhere, and people can have them from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed, 365 days a year for 30 years. That's the problem. Would you agree with that?
Completely. Yeah, my 5 cents on carbohydrates is I strategically called my podcast Low Carb and Fasting. And I always emphasize, to my group, lower carb. Don't call it low carb. Don't ask for a definition. Don't ask me how many carbs you should eat. Each person is different. Just lower your carbs. If I tell someone who's eating 200 grams of carbohydrates, lower it to 20 grams, the success rate isn't going to be high. It's not going to be high. But if I tell them, hey, you can lower it, like, 3 pieces of toast, how about 2 pieces of toast and have another boiled egg in the morning? Like, just little twist, and everyone can do it. And suddenly, then it becomes something doable for them. And, carbohydrate tolerance is so very different. I mean, I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have to manually inject insulin for every carbohydrate I eat. So, and that's an impossible task. So, I mean, if you're not diabetic, but Casey, you're not, right? I mean, your pancreas does an amazing job. It knows exactly how much insulin to produce to regulate your blood sugars and to keep your blood sugars steady all day long. I have to do that. I have to act like a working pancreas myself. I have to do that manually. It's a difficult task. So for me, I try to keep my carbohydrates as low as possible. I completely avoid sugars. In fact, I love the carnivore diet because that's as close to zero carb as possible. But when I do eat carbs, they're usually salads and low carbohydrate vegetables. This, for me, it has to be, my carbohydrate limit has to be very, very low, because I have to manage it with insulin. I have to then become my own, pancreas, and that's an easy task. But for someone else, who's otherwise perfectly healthy and fit, and perhaps even 30 years younger than I am, and engaged in team sports or whatever, I mean, they don't necessarily have to limit their carbs to the extent that I do. So we're all very different, right? But I think as a general population, we can all benefit from lowering our carbohydrate content, completely eliminating processed carbs, and avoiding sugar. Yeah. I mean, if we can all do that, we will all benefit. Now, how low you can go when it comes to carbohydrates is, depends on your age, your health status, etc. But we can all benefit from eliminating the processed carbs, sugar, and limiting carbohydrates.